So we're going to go ahead and, again, dive right on into Ruth chapter 1, verses 19 through 22. As I was walking around the room, I did hear a lot of really good observations and really good questions about the text. And so we're going to start off, and we're just going to read through it, and then, like I said, we're going to dive in. So the two of them, being who? Ruth and Naomi, went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So, right off the face of it, let's sort of dive in, line 1. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. What just happened? Well, Ruth just had that whole conversation with Naomi along the way, right? So Ruth and Orpah were like, "Hey, we'll come with you." And then all of a sudden, Naomi goes, "No, go back." And then Orpah's like, "Okay, I go back." And then Ruth's like, "No, I shall not go back." And Naomi's like, she doesn't say anything. She stops arguing. We don't know what she's thinking. She just stops. So in one sentence, we've gone from somewhere along the road, probably kind of close to Moab. I mean, I hate to think that Naomi was like almost to Bethlehem, and then she's like, "No, go back." But we don't know. I mean, again, I'm assuming. I'm making an assumption. But somewhere along the way, we're now in Bethlehem. So we've transpired all of that distance, and now, boom, setting change. We are in Bethlehem. Notice, too, real quick, a little observation. We have this phrase, "they came to Bethlehem," and then repeated down here again. They came to Bethlehem. This little section is a little bit of its own self-contained block, which is good for us to be able to look at. If you guys remember back to week 2, whenever I was talking about how we are splitting up the sections, I pointed out that the whole chapter is actually a really nice section in and of itself. It starts off with Elimelech and his family leaving Bethlehem at the time of a famine, and we're ending whenever just Naomi is returning to Bethlehem at the time of the barley harvest. And so we have these contrasting ideas, this sort of inclusio of repeated phrases that does mark off the whole of chapter 1 as a sort of complete thought. So at the end of today, we are going to go ahead and summarize the basic material of chapter 1. I just wanted to point that out to you as we go through. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and close out chapter 1. Ruth and Naomi, bam, back in Bethlehem, and they have caused a stir. There's a stir in Bethlehem. Let's hear from you guys a little bit. On page 37, Kelly Minter does give an explanation of stir, one possible interpretation, but the word can mean a lot of things beyond just what she said. But if you need a launching off point, or if you need something to sort of trigger your memory, what do you guys think? What are some words, some ideas, some feelings and emotions that come to mind whenever you think the town is stirred? Let's get some feedback. Cindy.
I read other things too, and I don't remember what Kelly said. I'll just say what I remember because of what hit me the most.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was that this stirred is the stirred, was what they used when Jesus rode into Bethlehem. Jerusalem, thank you.
One of those towns.
Yes, one of those important places.
I nodded. I was like, yeah!
Yes. And another thing, too, about it. Oh, I guess I'll talk about it later.
Go for it. Go for it.
All right. When they said something about, is this Naomi, the trip that they took, too, was a pretty long, yes, it wasn't an easy trip. I mean, uphills, mountains, through foothills and all kinds of cool stuff. So I have to think how hard it was, and I'm sure they didn't look real sweet when they got there.
No. Donkeys or anything, they just walked.
No. I mean, people in general in that time period did not look super pretty. It was a rough time. Praise the Lord for the 21st century. Praise the Lord for plumbing. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Stirred. She caused a stir. What are some words? What are some impressions that come to your mind? You can just shout it out.
People were excited.
People are excited. Okay.
Just
Lisa.
imagining women being women and talking.
Yes.
You know, like the gossiping. Oh my
Yes.
God, Naomi's back.
Yes.
I can just see it.
Yes. Excellent. Anybody else?
They must have known that her husband and sons died. They must have known. Or they would say, well, where's the rest of them?
Good.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I was wondering. Did they know, or they were like, oh,
I think.
Where's Elimelech? Yeah.
Wait, where are the boys? Where are
I
the
mean,
boys?
think about it. They were in Moab. The Israelites did not like the Moabites. So it's not exactly as though they're like popping over to the next door neighbors and saying, hey, so what's going over there, guys? No, this is a hated neighboring nation. So did they know?
No Facebook.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah.
How far was the trip?
Miles-wise, I'm not entirely certain, but if you remember the map that I had up over before, so if Bethlehem's right here, there's the body of water, and then it's right over here. Israel itself is not a huge place. It only takes like 7 or 8 hours driving time to traverse the whole of Israel. So driving time, not very long. Walking time, do we have study notes over here? Cindy,
I'm sorry.
did you have study notes? Do you have an answer?
I don't know how far it was.
Okay.
You know, but say what you
Now,
just said to me.
I'm not real good at, I look, but it said that they descended,
Mm-hmm.
it's down right,
Yes.
4,500 feet.
That's so
And
fun.
then they ascended 3,750 feet through the foothills of Judea.
Ooh.
So, it was a hard walk.
So that's about 50
It's a-
miles on my little thing.
Perfect. Excellent. 50 miles. So if you think about, on a backpacking trip, like we would usually do like 7 or 8 miles in a day on like a relatively comfortable, but like in nice, I got my nice shoes, I got my nice backpack. They're carrying their lives on their back. I mean, which is backpacking. So they're backpacking through the Judean wilderness. And so, I mean, yeah, it was not going to be an easy journey. And I'm sure, like I said, I agree completely. They did not look pretty when they showed up.
Very weird.
Yeah. So essentially there was a buzz. There was uproar. There was some type of like crazy, like what's going on? Oh my goodness! In the book, yeah, Lisa.
The other thing I'm saying is she did not ever come back in those 10 years. It's not like
Right.
I used to live in New Jersey and I come back and see my friends a lot in New Jersey. They didn't see her for 10 years.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
Yes, definitely.
How they recognize you. Man, 10 years makes a big difference in the way you look.
It's
Yes.
been more than 10 years, remember. It's 10 years minimum.
Yes, it's at least 10 years. So that's the only time frame that's specifically mentioned. Beyond that,
So 50
yes.
more.
And Ruth was with her.
Yes. Yeah, so let's dive in a little bit closer. Why were the women all abuzz? Why? So I heard some really good observations and thoughts as I was going around the room. So I know that there are some thoughts. So right away we have one. Go ahead. Say it again.
Ruth was with her.
Yeah. Who's this woman? Who is this person who was with Naomi? Yeah. Now, I tried so hard to find the answer to this question because in my mind, I wanted to know, did Ruth look like distinctive? Like, was her skin a different color? Was there a racial difference there between the Moabites and the Israelites? And I couldn't find the answer. So, if you remember, so they are related. It's Abraham and Lot, uncle and nephew, and those are where these tribes, these nations descended from. The time frame isn't huge, but there are a few hundred years. But they're living right next to each other. Mm-hmm. But somebody pointed out this morning, too, that probably the garb was different. What they were wearing potentially could have been different. So Ruth could have looked at least different culturally. But maybe she adopted some of Naomi's clothing. But who knows? So regardless, strange woman with Naomi. The heck is going on? Who's this person? Great. Why else would there have been a stir? Yeah. As we pointed out, where are all the dudes? They're all gone. Great. Other observations. She ate them, right? So whatever. That's what happens to anything that I lose. I ate it.
It just came out. I'm sorry.
Now I know why your son is. Her son.
Anybody else? Why was there this commotion?
Well, we were talking about how maybe it was something that Naomi did in Bethlehem before she left.
Okay.
Like maybe she was this fantastic friend or
Okay.
something to everybody, or you know, there was some special thing that she did.
Okay.
And everyone was like, "Yay, she's back!"
Okay. All right. So if we take a look at the names real quick. So is this Naomi? Does anybody remember what the word Naomi means, what the name means? It's pleasant. Yep, pleasant. So names in biblical times are really, really important. Names oftentimes are linked very closely to character. And so we don't know what kind of person Naomi was while she was living in Bethlehem. But the name at least gives us a hint that she was a relatively pleasant person. Relatively pleasant. And again, I don't want us to read too much into the word stirred. Kelly Minter definitely puts a positive spin on it, that like they were happy and excited to see her. The word itself doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that there was, again, sort of like a buzz. The word can mean, like, we can use this word in a battle. Like there was a buzz, there was an uproar, there was a commotion. So we don't, again, want to read too much into it, but there was definitely some, what's going on? What is going on? As somebody pointed out earlier, I mean, she was gone for 10 plus years. They hadn't seen her for that long. I mean, it's kind of surprising that she's here at all. Like, whoa, Naomi, thought you left for good. Wow, she's back. She's back. So let's take another look at what the women say. So the women said, is this Naomi? I don't know about you guys, but whenever I went through the text, I was like, did she really change that much?
10 years?
In 10
Oh,
years?
Yeah. If you
Now-
use your husband and your sons, that's...
Now, I mean, I think about my mother, who still looks like she could be my sister. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm prejudiced, but I'm like, can you really change that much that you're completely unrecognizable?
Did you see older people?
I mean, they recognized her.
Older people do change a lot.
They can change a lot.
Anti-wrinkles,
They can have wrinkles, but now, so let me say this. So, you know, we all recognize that we change and we grow. So they would have looked older too.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so I mean, is it that shocking that like, oh, well, she looks older. I mean, okay, this is Naomi.
Could be they weren't expecting her back.
Okay.
Like they were shocked.
Okay.
You know,
Good.
because they didn't know that she lost her husband and 2 sons, and she's back, or and they're like, oh my gosh.
Good.
Well, losing a husband and 2 sons is kind of going to age you too.
Good. Yes.
Well, she's been well fed. They haven't been, so she probably put on some weight.
That may be true. That may be true.
50 miles. She lost all that weight, man.
Good.
She looked good. After that trek.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to what you said about how she's been dealing with all of this grief and all of this bitterness. And it's worked its way through onto her face. I think that's very possible. I think that's very possible. That it wasn't just a physical, oh, well, she got older, but that the transformation of grief and bitterness came through so strongly that you could see it. And they're like, whoa, is this Naomi? And so the author is very intentionally doing this. He could have just said, and Naomi came back, and then launched directly into her speech, right? But he didn't. He's including these women to give commentary, to give a springboard. And so the fact that they're asking this question is important. It's not a long book. What's in here is important. These women are going to come back at the end as well, and they're going to comment on how Naomi has been filled again. Comment on the blessing that Ruth has been to her. And they're going to say, hey, Naomi has a son. Again, that emphasis on filling. But here, they're questioning, is this Naomi, the pleasant one that we knew? And it's off of that, then, that we have Naomi launching into her speech. She's reacting to what these women say. So let's take a closer look at that. Let's read her words again. She said to them, do not call me Naomi. Do not call me pleasant. Call me Mara. And Mara means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full. The Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So here we see really clearly that Naomi is reacting to the women's response to her appearance, to her, and that's a sort of a twofold word, both to her physical reappearing and also to what she looked like. And to her name, to her, again, in biblical times, names were super, super important. It's not like today where you're like, oh, just call me MJ, it's fine, whatever, it doesn't really matter, just whatever. No, names were identity. And she's rejecting here the identity of pleasant, and she is telling them, no, identify me as bitter. That is who I am. That is who I have become. So why is she bitter? Let's recap. She's bitter because she went away full. Now the word full, interesting word to use. If I think about myself and I'm full right now because I just had a delicious dinner. I am full. Naomi, whenever she left Bethlehem, was she physically full? No, she was starving because there was a famine, right? So what is the full meaning? What does full mean here?
The spirit is
Okay.
down.
Family, yeah. She had a family. I went away full of family, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Now let's dive into this real quick. Because I know for me at least, I go into this and I think, you went away full and the Lord has brought you back empty. But what about Ruth? And all of us are women, and we're like, excuse me, Miss Naomi, I think that you forgot about your lovely daughter-in-law who has just defied the world and said, no, where you go, I'll go, and I will die with you. The Lord may only separate us by death. And then you're like,
But in that
yes. Culture.
that's
Yes.
the word I want to say. In that culture, men were everything and women were at the bottom.
Right. And it wasn't necessarily that they were at the bottom, but that men were the ones who could make the decisions. They
Well,
were
really
recognized.
But
they would do the
women-
work.
The women really were.
Yeah. I mean,
Fine.
they had no cultural power. They had no ability to do the things. If you were a widow in this culture, you were essentially powerless, and you had no worth, really, and you had no means of providing. And so Ruth would have been of the same mindset. She would have understood. I mean, she may not even have objected. She may have been like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, you're empty. Because both of them are, think back to Naomi's speech whenever she's talking to her daughters-in-law. What does she say? Look, I don't have any husband. I don't have any sons. I can't give you hope. I can't give you a future. She's recognizing a very real truth of that
She says,
time.
If I would have sons, you'd have to wait
Right.
for them to grow up.
But she doesn't, and so she's empty. And Ruth is essentially empty too. Ruth hasn't had any kids. Ruth's just another mouth to feed. Ruth's essentially almost dead weight. And I mean, again, on the other side, we can look at the story as a whole. And first of all, we can, of course, say, hey, as women who are reading New Testament too, we understand Ruth as well as the whole of creation, but Ruth especially is, created by God. She's a special creature, and she's, of course then she has meaning and she has value, just like every other person, period, of course. But also, we look at the story as a whole, and we're like, yo, Naomi, that Ruth here, empty, she's going to be like your lifeline, yo! Like, she's going to be the one through whom redemption is provided. But think about the culture who would have been reading this. For them, this makes total sense. They'd have been nodding along and saying, yeah, she's empty. She's got nothing. She's got nothing. So let's take a closer look, too, about Naomi's accusation against God. Back earlier in the chapter, we had some inkling that Naomi was at least somewhat thinking, okay, well, the Lord, he has a hand, he's sovereign. He can go ahead and, there may be hope for you ladies that, may the Lord show his head to you like like you have shown his head to me. And she's got this idea that God has some power over their lives even as they return to a foreign land. But here, she really just takes the baseball bat and swings away, and she very directly attributes everything that has happened to her to God. It's not an accident. It's not God allowed it. This is from the hand of God. So let's take a closer look here. Let's read the words again. The Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. And again, that links back to Mara. Why? I went away full. The Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? When the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me. So I want you to note a couple of things about the words that she's using for God. Almighty, interestingly, is a word Shaddai. It's not El Shaddai. It's just Shaddai. And it maybe Shaddai, I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce these words. But it's different. And we're not going to get into the very nitty-gritty details of why it's so fascinating that it's different. But it's essentially a word that sort of means the enforcer, the Lord of, it's a corruption of the phrase the Lord of hosts. So if you think the Lord of armies, so the one who has the power to make things happen, is that word that she uses first. These two are actually capitalized Lord, Lord, Yahweh. This is the covenant name for God. And then she goes back to Almighty. And this is really interesting. Lots of really interesting things in here, guys. So specifically in this line, the Lord has testified against me. The word testified against is a phrase in Hebrew that if you didn't have one piece of it, it would just be basically, and the Lord answered. But the other phrase essentially brings it into a courtroom setting, and it's a very judicial, almost calling to account. And so whenever she says the Lord has testified against me, it's in a very real sense. The Lord is judging me. The Lord is calling me to account for sin. And this is especially makes a lot more sense too whenever you look at the second phrase. The Almighty, the one who's enforcing this, has brought calamity upon me. Calamity is used all throughout Scripture to refer to misfortune and basically calamity that God brings about in direct response to sin. So it's linked very closely with judgment. And so Naomi here is recognizing, hey, you know what? The Lord's judging me. This is just, maybe we deserve it. The Lord brought, think back to our discussion about the famine, how we said that the Lord, because this is the time of the judges, they're going through this cycle of rebellion, and then God brings a judgment. And then he sent a judge to deliver them, and then they are good for a little bit, and then they're like, no, foreign God, it's fine. And so they go through this cycle over and over again. And we said probably, it's not a definitive, but probably the famine was a judgment that God brought to Israel at this time to, again, bring their hearts back to him. And Naomi and Elimelech thought, we can escape God's judgment. We're going to get out. And of course we know that they did not escape. And that Elimelech died. And Mahlon and Chilion died. And Naomi is the only one who's left. And so she's recognizing that judgment has been given. And she's bitter. It's very interesting because she's recognizing that there is justice, but she's not seeing any grace. She's seeing the sovereign will of God being brought to bear, but she's not seeing any love in how he's dealing with her. All she sees is that, hey, I went away full and I'm empty now. I've got nothing. I have no hope. I have no future, and it's God's fault.
Have you ever seen anyone that has lost a husband and all their children?
Yep.
It's something they have to deal with for a while till they can get back to God, because they do feel bitter. They feel such a loss. Even in this time, people are that way. They're just so.
They can choose to be that way. I don't think that's always the case.
Yeah.
No, but I've met people that have just.
I think that what you're saying is we can identify with Naomi.
Yeah.
We can identify with the spirit of, hey, stuff's gone wrong. Maybe some of it's my fault, but really, God, do you have to bring all of this down on me? All of it? So don't call me Naomi. How dare you call me Naomi? Call me bitter. This is what I decide to identify as. And it's interesting, somebody pointed out this morning that throughout the rest of the book, what do we refer to Naomi as? Huh? Naomi. It's not Mara. And so the author very definitively says, despite what Naomi wants to be called, despite the fact that she wants to be identified as bitter, he is refusing to align himself with that and saying, no, through the Spirit of God, we're going to call you by the name which you've been given, which is pleasant, because there is hope. There is a future for you. You just don't know it yet.
But just like
Naomi.
the other lesson that we had, it's really true. Honest feelings.
Mm-hmm.
This is how she's feeling. She's like, I've lost everything.
Yep.
And some people feel that way, and some people can understand that God's in control and all that, but you still have a terrible sadness.
Yeah.
Terrible sadness.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I
No.
just can't. Even on
And
my children,
we'll
my
get into
husband.
in our discussion time too how we can again sort of walk this line where there's this anger and bitterness, but how do we deal with it? How do we deal with it well? How can we sit before God and cry out well instead of either again stifling it and saying I'm going to pretend like nothing's going on. And we also don't want to, go down the whole Job train where he's like, and you know what, God? You screwed me over bad, and I don't think you're a good God anymore. And then so God was like, so I'm sorry, where were you whenever I started the world again? Where were you whenever have you been in the sky whenever you send the snow down? You haven't. You haven't. Oh, that's me. That's right. Job. And Job's like, I'm sorry. Don't send the Leviathan on me. I'm sorry.
But I think when you're really honest with God,
Mm-hmm.
He can give you that healing.
Oh, yeah.
But if you just want to put a smile on your face, oh, everything's just wonderful. I
Yep.
just lost all my kids and my husband, and I'm just so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we see two faiths presented in chapter 1. We're seeing the faith of, let's go ahead to the next slide real quick here. We see the faith of Naomi, who's coming back, an Israelite who had a heritage of faith, but whenever all the things came down, has turned bitter, has turned angry, and I mean, you can't read it without hearing the venom dripping from it. Versus Ruth, the foreigner, who almost does have this sort of happy-go-lucky, where you go, I'll go, it's fine, I'm just going to come along. I don't know about Israel, but it's fine, I'm just going to come along. Go ahead and lie down at this guy's feet and uncover his feet. Okay, that's fine, sure, whatever you say, Naomi. And you're like, okay, Ruth, go for it. But we see these faiths held side by side. And neither of them are, necessarily condemned, but Ruth is definitely being highlighted as, we're going to see in the later chapters, Boaz is going to praise Ruth's faith. But we're going to see a transformation in Naomi. Naomi, too, she has the last word, notice. And again, the book is named Ruth. But at least this first chapter is very much about Naomi. It's very much about Naomi and her journey to faith. Look at even the phrasing here. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite was with her. She was there too. But Naomi returned. She's the one who returned. And again, let's take a look here at this really significant phrase. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. This is so significant. Guys, if they had come back at almost any other time of the year, they would have starved to death. There would not have been anything for them, unless they had been able to crawl into somebody's house and beg them for food. This is basically the only time whenever they would have been able to find sustenance to be able to make it throughout the rest of the year. Again, talking about faith, let's not forget that Naomi did choose to go back. She had something back in Moab. She chose to leave behind. She did choose to go back to Bethlehem. But this is, again, all that we've seen here. The fact that God allowed them to return at the beginning of the barley harvest, the fact that he brought crops back to Bethlehem, the house of bread in the house of bread, the fact that Ruth was so faithful, that she said, no, I'm going to come with you. I'm not leaving you. And Naomi doesn't even recognize it. Ruth probably doesn't even know it yet. She's just like, I'm staying with you, Naomi. Sorry, I'm here too. This is the hand of a God who loves and who cares and who is guiding along the way, even though Naomi, in her bitter, navel-gazing mind, can't see it yet. Now, again, I'm not judging Naomi. I'm like, I feel you, I can feel you. But she doesn't see what God's doing. We can. We see the whole story. We know. We get the benefit of hindsight. We're like, oh, this is such a great story. And Naomi's like, this sucks. But right here, again, it's just a wonderful picture of God's sovereignty here at work. Before we break into our small groups, I'm going to go ahead and show you a giant sort of summary of the entire chapter laid out. We're going to recap chapter 1. If you guys remember back to our first session, I challenged us to, whenever we're going through the text, one of the things that we want to do is when we reach the end of a section, we want to be able to summarize it. So this is one of the things that a tool that can help you is if you sort of make an outline so you can see the big pictures. And on the next slide, I'll show you how I sort of generally summarized it. But we start at the top and the bottom, and we have these contrasting ideas of famine and then the harvest. As we go through, we leave Bethlehem, and then we come back to Bethlehem. The contrasting names, Naomi and Mara. Again, we have the entering and leaving of Moab. And then we have these wonderful speeches, kissing and weeping, and then at the center, I am too old to conceive. That's Naomi's big gripe. She's got no hope. She's got no future. And yet, we see the hand of God throughout. So how would I summarize it? First of all, I just can't help but think of There and Back Again, a tale by Bilbo Baggins. But, so they left and they came back. There's a theme of a journey. Naomi is empty and bitter. Bitter because she's empty. And that's clearly at the center of the story. That's the main point, is that Naomi doesn't have a hope and doesn't have a future. But at the same time, we see the hand of God moving through. And that's going to come real bright to the forefront as we look next week. And there's some really interesting language that the author uses to highlight that. It's going to be super fun. But so those are some ideas that I would throw up as being central to chapter 1 as we go through. Next week, we will be talking about days 3 through 5 of session 2. I'm going to ask that you go ahead and reread chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, just to sort of refresh your memory. And I'm sure as you go through the homework, Kelly Minch is going to have you do it as well. But if you want to just sort of, again, look through your observations, write those things down, we'll go through it again. If you have questions about any of this, you can ask about it in your discussion time. I think that's it.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and split.